way you see this within anarchism is the fact that most anarchists, when you ask them what kind of anarchists they are, will put an adjective or a descriptive with their anarchism. I'm an anarcho-feminist, I'm a queer anarchist, I'm a person of color anarchist, I'm an anarcho-communist, I'm a anarcho-syndicalist, I'm et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's many, many, many ways of modifying what you understand anarchism to be. And actually, rather than a form of divisiveness or factionalism or splintering of anarchism, I think this is exactly when we do this thing of saying, wow, we've forgotten about the ecology. Now I'm an ecological anarchist, and that's what I care about and passionate about, so that's what I'm going to do. But I'm glad you're an anarcho-feminist, because that's a really important thing too. It's just more to show the particularity of someone's focus and concentration. But I actually love that we name it or are clear about the fact that we have these things that are seemingly irreconcilable, but they're actually not. They're all part of the project. And if we all didn't take our own passions and bring them to that, we wouldn't actually ever be able to sort of transform the whole of life. So in a sense, we're trying to balance the irreconcilable, or bring together all these differences together. So I actually love the fact that anarchists, instead of, a lot of Marxist groups have done this where they've splintered into separate groups and they give themselves names that are not descriptive. So the International Socialists, or we could come up with a host of socialist organizations where they just switch a word or make a word plural to distinguish the fact that there's some deep-seated differences between them. And those differences actually pull them apart, and then they don't often speak to each other or are actually competing with each other. And what I like about anarchism is saying, look, there's these things that sound irreconcilable, but if we actually name them, ecology or forms of economic, anarcho-syndicalism, looking at a form of economic organization, or trying to think of all sorts of other anarchist adjectives, that in a sense we're being really transparent and clear and public about what we want, and knowing that they all need to work together, and that's really distinctive. And that we're not in competition, we actually could bring in forms of mutual aid and voluntary association to make them work together. So I talked about this again, but I want to repeat it. Is therefore anarchists try to always sort of take a utopian outlook on things, is what would we want the world to look like? What's our crazy long-term goal of how we want to structure the world, and how do we start finding those moments in the present that can push toward that? What things do we see now that point beyond capitalism? Knowing that I want to envision what a non-capitalist society looks like. And I wish we did more thought experiments where we sat around and just like, wow, let's just imagine what it would look like to do making food without capitalism. What would that look like? How would we distribute it? How would we grow it? How would we produce it? How would we, what would that look like? Because we still need to do that form of economics, but what would it look like? But we do a lot of, at the micro level, in the here and now, pull out possibilities of ways food can be done. So when we get to the prefigurative practices in a minute, what I think is interesting is some things we do that point past capitalism get so popular they get taken over by other people, and then we all kind of have to ban them because they've lost the kind of pushing edge and find something else. So a good example is guerrilla gardening, where a lot of anarchists were like, yeah, that's public land, we're just going to throw seeds there and rip up some ground and grow a garden there because it's a perfectly good space to be growing food and people could just come eat this food. Michelle Obama's doing a garden at the White House now, on the White House. Where I live in the state of Vermont, people are just ripping up the State House lawn this year. The city budget can't afford the flowers, the state budget in Vermont can't afford the nice little picturesque flowers in front of the State House this year anyway. Suddenly they're like, oh, I guess it's okay if people rip up the State House lawn. They're planting vegetables all over it. Guerrilla gardening may not point past capitalism in the state anymore. It might be a cool thing to do, and it's a good thing to do to have more and more food in places where people can just grab it and eat it. But there's enough people doing that now that think it's okay. It's not pushing the edge of private property anymore. It's not pushing the edge of how people get food. But that's a cool thing that we did that. That we pushed the edge and got people to think a little bit past. Maybe the next time they'll think a little bit farther past. So another example I want to give in this area of us pushing the edges is, a neighbor of mine who I talk to all the time, run into people all over, I love where I live, you just constantly are talking to totally people who are nothing like you. Never talked about politics with this guy. He's probably in his 70s or something. Comes up to me on April 1st, last week, and just walks up to me out of the blue. I don't even know why, I don't even think he knows what my politics are. And he was like, he goes, I just don't get it. Things are so bad economically in this country. In the rest of the world, people are smashing bank windows. He goes, why aren't people doing that here? And I was like, yeah, today in London, I just saw, I'm like, I just saw they were smashing bank windows in London. He goes, that's what I said, that's what I meant. And he'd seen people smashing windows in London that day, anti-capitalists and anarchists, as part of the protest against the G20. And he thought that was a cool idea. Now, I think that's great. Now, maybe that's not a prefigurative practice, it's an anti-practice. because this isn't a good example for me about building a new society, smashing. I hope we have a society where we don't want to smash the glass. We take over this building and make it something really cool. We're glad the glass is there because it's kind of nasty out today. But it's a really interesting thing that when we push things, suddenly it becomes okay to smash bank windows. And other people that aren't anarchists have smashed bank windows. I'm not saying this is an anarchist invention. But it's a really interesting thing for us to do that. So that's how do we push past? And that binds anarchists together. We try to do that continually. Okay, the last two things that I think bind sort of anarchists together broadly are a really strong relationship between the means and the ends. And it sort of relates to what I just said, but that we don't say, oh yeah, I'm going to set aside that I'm actually going to be nice to any of you people, because in the better society I'll be nice to you, but I don't have time for that because I'm a revolutionary. That anarchists go, no, how we treat each other now, what it looks like to talk to each other, what process looks like, what it likes to live with each other, etc., is our part of what we're doing to create a different society, is transforming social organization and social relationships. I keep coming back to Marx because I really adore Marx, a lot of Marx's work. And what I like about it is I hate I don't understand Marx's capitalism as a economistic work. I understand it as him saying the problem with capitalism is not how it does the economy, it's how it destroys our social relationships, and how it structures our social relationships. It gets us to act toward each other in a way that becomes completely invisible, but yet we all do it all the time, and it starts seeming more and more hegemonic, more and more so in the subconscious we don't even question how we relate our values below it. And in a sense, at his best, his work was about coming up with alternative forms of social relationships, how we relate to each other on the personal level, but also on the macro level. Again, when I said at the beginning that for me, anarchism is about what would a different form of social organization look like. So I think Marx's work could be made so much more anarchistic if we understood what would we want, how would we want to transform social relations to be non-hierarchical too. So anarchists spend a lot of time grappling with the fact is, oh my God, is what I'm eating right now have anything to do with what I think everybody should be doing, what I'm wearing, how I'm treating my friends, etc. Really struggling with how what we're doing now has any relationship to the world we want to see in the future. And that's a good thing. Almost nobody spends as much time obsessing and worrying about that as anarchists, and I think that's a good thing that binds us all together. And we do it really badly sometimes. We're really bad toward each other. We do just as many screwed up things as the rest of the world does because we're part of this world. But we at least are really, really self-conscious about trying to intervene in the way we act badly all the time. And that's really, really important because we understand that as part of our end. Okay, so the last thing that binds anarchists together, I think, is, and I started at the beginning of this, is the word self, or do it ourselves. Is that anarchists believe each of us has the capacity and the ability and the desire and the smarts and the know-how to do whatever we want to do. I love the fact that we believe in each other. We believe in ourselves. We believe that people together can really make the world they want. And that's a profound, profound thing. Most people grow up thinking they only have very few options. They are only capable of certain things. They are only so smart, or that they're stupid. That they will never be able to read that book. They will never be able to do that skill. They will never be able to. And anarchists are so good at saying, you know, if we all want to figure out how to fix bikes, we can do that. If we want to figure out how to read these books, we can figure out a way to educate people to read those books. If we want to figure out a way to make food differently, we can do that. We can do that together through, as I said earlier, self-governance or self-management or do it ourselves. All sorts of ways, pretty much put the word self in front of anything. But that's a really, really striking thing. It's a profound belief in each of us that I really think binds all anarchists together. That we look at each other really on the level is when we try our best, at our best, look at each other with all our diversity to all the different points in our life as all profoundly equal and capable of being who we want to be in a society that we want to be in. And that's a really generous, lovely politics, because most politics don't do that. They're like, I'm a legislator and I'm a legislator because I'm smarter than the rest of society. And that's why I've been elected. I've heard so many politicians say that. They're like, I know what's best for everybody else. Or that those people aren't smart enough to make decisions, so I need to do it. Or those people aren't capable enough to learn how to do this skill, so that's why I need to get paid more. And that's a really profoundly different assumption that anarchists have, that everybody is capable of doing those things. And they may not want to do that, but that's a really different thing. And when you start looking at all of people and all of society like that, it transforms how we can transform life, I think. That's what I love about anarchists. And ultimately, I think at our best, it would be about how do we also come up with ways to include everybody in power. And by power, I mean the power to decide what the world looks like. the power to make decisions about the world. Whether you want to talk about that as direct democracy or making power from the bottom up, that anarchists understand ourselves as we can shape the world, we can decide the world, we can determine the world. It isn't enough that we can just grow food on our own, but meanwhile someone else is deciding sort of the world global food economy, that we can kind of figure out a way to make food work, and we can decide how we want food to work, and we can do the food work too. And that's a really different way of looking at the world. Okay, so those are some of the things I was just broadly that would maybe overview defining anarchism.